I'm smoking my Nording as a church warden, and in it I've got some Lane BCA, which I'm enjoying immensely. This is going to be the second part of my The Occult, Exorcism, Deliverance and Me talks. And today I want to think about the training that I had to become an official exorcist in the Church of England, or an official deliverance minister as we prefer to refer to it. I'd been acting unofficially often in the church, being very aware of the dangers of the role that I was in, not from any demonic or spiritual forces, but from the damage that such men and women can do to good Christian people. But I felt that there was a need, and occasionally the need to take drastic action against some things, some beings. Anyway, when I moved to Bristol, I was asked to take an official role, which meant that I should be trained, because the Church of England was very aware of things that had gone wrong in its own church. One of the reasons that they chose training was because of the way some people had been treated by those who were seeking to use deliverance ministry, and the terrible results which ensued. One took place in the church where Carolyn was growing up and where I joined. There was a man who was mentally ill, and a group of people decided that he was possessed, and they tried to deliver him from that possession. In the end, the man committed suicide. So the church felt the need that all its ministers in deliverance should be trained. We went away for, I think it was a fortnight, and on the course were priests who were going to be trained, priests who had been trained, some scientists and psychiatrists. The first thing we were taught was how to take a proper register of the things that were needed. So we had a set form that we had to use that went into the medical history of those who had come to us, that where possible we would get permission to talk to their doctor, or if they're under a psychiatrist, to their psychiatrist. If not, we were free to use one of the psychiatrists that we knew. The important thing was that we wanted to discard any possibility that what was happening was caused through a medical condition. We took a case history of the things that were happening. We were given examples of things that had happened, and we were to discuss what we understood had happened. And in a way, it was up to each one of us to decide where we stood on the belief in demons and possession. For example, some people believed that Christians could be possessed. I myself don't believe that. I believe that if somebody was fully a Christian, that they could only be oppressed from outside. But I believed that an ordained minister had been given power to deal with these things. Amongst the things we discussed were things that had been happening in other people's experience. For example, there was a house where a particular set of drawers kept opening and closing by themselves at different times. You could be in the room, and if the drawer was open, you would see it close. If it was closed, you would see it open. Didn't always happen, but it did happen. And eventually, we were able to link that not to spiritual problems, but to damp and the underground railway that passed beneath the house. When the drawers were damp, they stayed shut. When they were dried out a bit, the drawers loosened and would open or would close. They opened usually when the underground railway passed beneath them and shook the foundations of the house, and equally when they closed. So that was one case where there was no spiritual possession. Others, we were given stories where there was some spiritual contact, and we discussed how to deal with those. I'm not going to go into details with the stories that we were told, because some of them were extremely confidential, and I don't want to give any clue as to who might be involved, and some of them it would be very obvious if I told the story. We were also introduced to witches and learnt much about their faith and their religion, and soon realised that that had nothing to do with the devil, nothing to do with evil. In fact, the majority were good, honest people. There was a community who were looking after one of the prehistoric sites and the woodland around it, which they used for their ceremonies. They wanted the church involvement in the running of the site itself for the visitors and that kind of thing. And they approached a local vicar, and he wouldn't have anything to do with them. So they approached a local bishop, and he asked one of the members of our group if he would liaise with the pagan community and go on their committee and help run the group, which he did. In case you're wondering, witchcraft is very, very old. To be a witch, in many ways, you had to be part of a particular group. And there are two basic groups of ancient witchcraft who followed different teachers. Some families, some witches could date their families back many generations, but others have recently joined, especially when the pagan revival started. Witches are mainly seeking to link with nature, link with the powers that can be brought about through ritual. Many of them are involved in conservation. Many of them are involved in healing. Many of them are involved in works of prayer for protection and that kind of thing for people. I'm not going to go into many more details, but to say that I myself have attended covens. I haven't partaken of the chalice because I wasn't a witch. But I've also taken part in equinox services and in services to mark the seasons, which I've put on for them. But anyway, that's another story. After the training, we were anointed in holy oil. And the thing about that oil was that it was mixed with a very strong rose oil. So it's something that I'll always remember, that smell of roses, as we were signed with the cross and as our hands were signed with the cross to enable us to do the work we were called to do. Once my training had finished, then my work started in earnest. The main things that I was involved in, because they were the main things that came up, were the cleansing of houses where there were various things that had disturbed people. And usually nothing happened afterwards. The cleansing worked and there was no more problems. And often it would be in houses that weren't lived in. What would happen is the local council would have one or two families that reported strange things, and they would leave the house empty for a while, and then they would invite me in to deal with whatever was there. And usually members of the council would come and join me. I think partly because they were wondering if anything spectacular would happen. And my insistence, if they did, was that they all received communion. And that's how I'd start on the cleansing of a house. I would celebrate communion in the main room of the house, and we would all receive communion. Then I would leave all the doors open, the front door especially, and we would go upstairs, and I would enter one of the rooms. I would anoint the windowsills with holy oil and say a prayer of protection and blessing. I would sprinkle holy water in the room and ask that anything that was in the room would leave. And then I would close that door and anoint that door, and so on through the rest of the house, until the last door to be closed would be the front door, and that would be anointed. And that was it. And then after a few weeks, the council would put families in the house again. And as far as I know, there were no more problems. In my next talk, I will probably talk a bit more about what I think about demonic influence, the influence of demons or of spiritual beings rather than evil people. And believe me, evil people were sometimes beyond and behind some of the things that I dealt with. But anyway, I think that's enough. I would encourage you to respond in the box below, either by saying we think you should stop this immediately, or carry on with your stories. All the things I'm telling you are my experience. Your mileage may be much different, especially those of you who are ministers. All I can say is that what I'm describing happened, and it worked for me. Now may God bless you. May his love pour down upon you. May your God continually be with you. May he never let you go. And may all of us, believers or unbelievers, enjoy our lives and live them to the full.